May I now request our convener, Lieutenant General Vinayak Patankar, to please introduce the chairperson and speakers for the panel discussion on India's security in a changing world order. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before we proceed with the third session of the day, I have a small request to make. May I request all of you to rise, and we'll maintain a minute's silence to pay our respects to the victims of 26/11. Today is the anniversary of that unfortunate incident. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We go into our session 3, which is a little departure from what we've had since morning. We're going to have a panel discussion, and it is going to be chaired by an old friend and a journalist I greatly admire, Mr. Nitin Gokhale. I'll request the chairperson and the panelists to please come and occupy their seats. And in the meantime, I'll use that time to introduce or say a few words about Nitin Gokhale. Author, thought leader, and one of South Asia's leading strategic analysts, Nitin Gokhale has 40 years of rich and varied experience behind him as a conflict reporter, editor, author, and now a media entrepreneur who owns and curates 2 important digital platforms. The first one is, some of you are acquainted with that, bharatshakti.com, .in actually, and stratnewsglobal.com. Both focus on national security, strategic affairs, and foreign policy matters. Both platforms are extremely popular, and those of you who haven't sampled those, I strongly recommend that you go to these 2 sites and see it for yourself. At the beginning of his long and distinguished career, Nitin Gokhale has lived and reported from India's northeast for 23 years. Let me add here, he speaks very fluent Assamese. What he doesn't know about the northeast is not worth knowing. Writing and analyzing various insurgencies in the region, and this was at those crucial times when the insurgency was pretty bad there. You must have also seen him on the television screens reporting from Kargil during 1999. Author of a dozen books on wars, insurgencies, and conflicts, Nitin Gokhale relocated to Delhi in 2006 and was the Security and Strategic Affairs editor at the famous and popular channel NDTV. Of course, that was for a short stint. Well, not very short stint, but that was before launching his own initiative in 2015. He's an alumnus of the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies in Hawaii. He now writes, lectures, and analyzes security and strategic matters in Indo-Pacific and travels regularly to the US, Europe, South and Southeast Asia. He is another bloke, I might use the word since our Aussie friends are here. Okay, he's another bloke who last 4 days has probably slept in 4 different destinations. First, when I rang him up, he was in Taiwan. Thereafter, he was in Bangkok. I finally caught up with him when he had returned to Delhi. And now, when he rang me up, he said, I'm in Pune now. He also teaches at our Defense Services Staff College, the 3 war colleges, National Defense College, College of Defense Management, and intelligence schools, both at the RNAW and Intelligence Bureau. So that's a pretty heavy introduction to a man who is many-faceted. Over to you, Nitin.
Thank you, General Pattankar. That was very generous of you to give us such a long introduction. In fact, I had mentioned to you that it's a long biography. My office probably sent you, and you need not have read all that, but thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, after a sumptuous meal topped with Puran Podi, if any one of you had, which is such a drug-like, delicacy in Maharashtra, if you had it with the ghee, you may want to actually doze off. But let me promise you, with this stellar panel here, you'll have more food for thought perhaps this afternoon, because this session entitled actually exactly like what the flagship session is, India's Security in a Changing World Order. So we intend to do this little differently, as General Pattankar said. I'm going to request the panelists for opening remarks for a few minutes, about 7 to 9, 10 minutes. And then we get into question answers. Flowing from their remarks, then I'll have some questions for them. And then we'll open it for the audience like it was done in the previous session. So without much ado, I'll request Mr. Jayant Umranikar. But before he takes the stage, let me introduce him briefly. He is a IPS officer, former IPS officer of the 1973 batch. Was in the Cabinet Secretariat, that is the Research and Analysis Wing, also in the Foreign Service. He's been there and done that in his police career and also intelligence career. And finally, he was also the DGP of Maharashtra and has had the distinction of doing anti-Naxal operations, served in the state CID, and someone who watches Pakistan very closely. Over to you, Mr. Umranikar.
Thank you so much. I thank the organizers for calling me here for this session. I'm more comfortable dealing with law and order than world order. But today I have to talk about the world order. So to help me out, I have one PPT. I would like you to see that. This is what the Kissinger said. Our age is insistently and at times almost desperately in pursuit of a concept of world order. What he basically says is, truly global world order has never existed. What we have today is the product of the Peace Conference of Westphalia, and this product was not even discussed outside Europe. What was the purpose? The purpose of Westphalia was circumcising Roman Pope's power to excommunicate, or in modern language you can say sanction, or declare a heretic, or in modern language you can say a rogue nation. So this order was supposed to be based on two principles: commonly accepted rules, and second is consensus on the legitimacy of the arrangement. So the present order was created in 44-45, post-World War II, basically by the victors of the World War. And it can be summed up as a free and open order given by the victors of World War II and US-led and probably US-made rules based on international order. It created political and economic institutions, like we have United Nations, then we have Security Council, where 5 powers have visa. They also created financial institutions, like there was the World Bank, then there was GATT, which later on turned into World Trade Organization and things like that. and the US was the biggest shareholder in these institutions, and so the 20th century became known as the Pax Americana. Then came the Cold War. Militarily, world at that time was bipolar. There was US West on one side and NATO and USSR Warsaw Pact on the other side. India, Indonesia, and Yugoslavia created the non-aligned movement. NPT was negotiated in 60s, and the MAD, Mutual Assured Destruction Fear, resulted in SALT agreements. Arms control talks between US and USSR succeeded in bringing down collective nuclear arsenals from a high of nearly 6,500 to 65,000 to 12,000 warheads. And then came the unipolar moment. The Cold War ended in 1989 with the reunification of Germany and dissolution of the Soviet Union Warsaw Pact. USA used this unipolar moment for expansion of EU and NATO. In 3 stages, the NATO expanded, adding nearly 28 countries. The next stage was destruction of Yugoslavia and destabilization of West Asia. The 9/11 attacks prompted invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq by the US-led coalition of the willing and the $3 trillion war against terror. And these interventions incited the Arab Spring in Egypt, Tunisia, and devastated Libya and Syria. The irrelevance of UNSC, the Security Council, in all these conflicts was stark. And the world needed institutions not dominated by the West, and so we saw the emergence of BRICS, SCO, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, New Development Bank, etc. The dollar dominance in global trade was nearly 100%. The US control over transmission of payments through SWIFT and the denomination of oil in dollars augmented unipolarity. So a new papacy emerged that could unilaterally sanction, that is excommunicate, any state or declare it rogue or terrorist, that is heretic or apostate, to intervene, invade, destroy, rebuild, and abandon at will. Most of the sanctioned and invaded states, surprisingly or not so surprisingly, were linked to fossil fuels, as the US dollar is linked to fossil fuels consumption. Trump pulled USA out of Paris Climate Change Convention and the UN Human Rights Council. In 2002, see what happened to SALT. SALT was supposed to be the best way to keep the world peace. In 2002, US withdrew from the 1972 anti-ballistic missile, that is ABM treaty. In 2019, US quit the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. The only surviving arms treaty between Russia and the US now is the New START Treaty. It imposes a ceiling on operational and strategic nuclear weapons, but it expires in 2026, and there are no indications that it will be renewed. The USA has a 30-year nuclear modernization program to provide credible deterrence against regional aggression, and that is on. This has been used to justify developing and deploying more usable low-yield nuclear weapons. And the US has also tested a tactical nuke in 2020. Since we had some discussion about tactical nuclear weapons, I would like to offer my opinion. Tactical nuclear weapons are possibly meant for the use against the non-nuclear powers. Otherwise, it's a breach of the threshold of nuclear threshold, and it might invite a huge retaliation. So Russia and China have hypersonic delivery systems to evade missile defenses and nuclear torpedoes, new cruise missiles, and satellite imagery over China has revealed that at least there are 3 new missile storage sites, and China may expand its arsenal from 350 warheads to 1,000 by 2000. The Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, concluded in 1996, cannot enter into force because US and China have yet to ratify it. Developments in space and cyber domains are rendering conventional and nuclear weapons command and control systems vulnerable. What are the events that challenged the global order? Rise of China as the second largest economy, its decision to rebut the law of the sea tribunal's decision on its expansive claims in South China Sea. Then vote for the Brexit in the UK and its adverse economic impact on UK. After Ukraine-related sanctions, the world order is fragmenting. Europe is in recession and Germany is getting deindustrialized. Asia Pacific is emerging as the new economic and political center with the rise of China, India, Indonesia, South Korea, and Vietnam. The inability of WHO and major powers to coordinate global response to COVID-19 has also shown that the institutions created are not really effective. Russia-Ukraine war and the failure of US and West sanctions to curtail Russian ability to wage war. This is also becoming apparent. Russia is getting more money per oil barrel. Current account surplus is at an all-time high. Revenue receipts are 25% higher than the last year, and low public debt. The debt GDP ratio in Russia is just 20%. It is helping them to sustain their economy. So what I feel about is we are witnessing some kind of a clash of civilizations that Samuel Huntington had predicted. Is it West versus the rest? Huntington had said that future military conflicts will occur between clashing civilizations. He saw a world system comprising of 8 civilizations: Western, Japanese, Confucian, Hindu, Islamic, and Slavic Orthodox, as well as Latin American and African. The West is now on top, but other civilizations are catching up to challenge its hegemony and reshape the world on the basis of non-Western values and beliefs. It will be the West against the rest in future. This is what Huntington had predicted. Russia-Ukraine war is turning into Western versus Slavic Orthodox civilizations clash. There are many speeches by Putin where he refers to Russia as a civilizational state. And possibly what we are witnessing between Russia and Ukraine, he views as a conflict between two civilizations, the Western civilization and the Slavic Orthodox. The result of this conflict will define the emerging world order. In his address to the world leaders in Bali at G20 summit, PM Modi had also hinted at the changes when he said that the onus lies on us to draft a new world order for the post-COVID era. So this is the kind of background we have, and then we come to the concept of security. It has been discussed in the morning, so I will just shorten the text. The concept of national security has been enlarged now, and it includes military as well as non-military eras. Security of the people, not just territory. That is the mantra nowadays. Indian defense analysts talk of preparedness for 2.5 front war possibility. China and Pakistan being two obvious fronts, the remaining half front is the internal security, which is generally handled by the civilian entities unless the armed forces are asked to intervene. And I feel that this half front is of utmost importance to all of us. The new concept of national security is a seamless construct, beginning with and encompassing internal security, social cohesion, policing, justice system, and it is the failure to recognize this aspect that has plagued our strategic thinking. Our national capabilities are mainly dependent on the robustness of internal institutions. But the police, which is nearly twice in number than the armed forces, legal framework and judicial system have long been neglected. As it is, India suffers from multiple fault lines of religious or caste-based divisions, persisting social inequality, degradation of environment, etc. So there is a need to have a fresh look at the methods within the legal framework to deserve timely justice to citizens and reduce avoidable internal conflicts. Now, what are the external factors? After the fall of Soviet Union, India lost its privileged relationship with the USSR, but we have retained partnership, call it dependence, for defense equipment. We have repaired our relations with US and carried out market-oriented reforms in 1992. But two of our neighbors are in flux, one economically and the other politically. Taliban's return to power in Afghanistan has led to a shift in the balance of power in South Asia, and it has whetted ambitions of militant groups in the region. So even now, for a moment, if you see a lull in the terrorist activities, let's presume that is going to increase in future. The rise of China is disturbing the existing international order. India is fighting terrorism and expansionism. India has shown the political will to take tough decisions. However, we import nearly 90% of fuel, 60% of natural gas, and 30% of coal. So, energy security will be a constant challenge and influence all our policies and alignments in future. These are the governance challenges that we face. Partisan identity politics, criminalization, social justice, poverty, empowerment, rule of law, human rights, corruption, favoritism, center-state conflicts, lack of accountability and transparency, and most of it is result of misgovernance, and that is what leads to popular agitations and insurgencies. And what are the governance tools? Bureaucracy, intelligence, criminal justice system comprising police, prosecution, and judiciary, and military, and all of them need reforms. I did not go into details. Books have been written and commissions have been held on these topics. These are the internal security challenges: terrorism, insurgency, coastal security, organized crime in its nexus with terrorism, religious fundamentalism, religious-based extremist outfits, communal conflicts, caste conflicts, and so on. Then we also have external threats having bearing on internal security. Cyber attacks and misuse of social media, fake news are also creating a big problem. The misuse of social media platforms, I need not mention, everybody is aware of it. These platforms are being misused by the extremists, and most of the popular microblogging websites are also being used basically for planning and mobilization of civil unrest at various places. This is the last slide. It's about G20 presidency. It's an opportunity to influence global trends, but I hope that we do not get detracted and our attention from internal security does not shift. At the same time, when it comes to the internal security or even strategic planning, there is a need to evolve consensus on various issues that affect national security policy. We don't have a document on national security policy, and the main reason is there is no consensus. If you see the contesting political parties, their views about even important issues are many times contrary to each other, and this is one big lacuna that I see. So what do we have to do in this world order that is changing? I feel that we have to be suitably aligned in foreign policy that is based on self-interest and not on ideology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Umranikar. I think you've set the tone for what we need to do. May I invite Dr. Tara Kartha now to speak? Just a brief introduction. She's well known for her articles these days, analysis. She spent 17 years at the National Security Council Secretariat, which, of course, as all of you know, sits at the apex of the national security architecture. And there she worked on terrorism, other security issues, also was in charge of probably the coordination at the NSAB. And during her tenure, she has worked with Kargil Review Committee, which was actually in 2001, which looked at national security reforms. The group of ministers reports, which finally implemented some of those reforms, and we finally saw the appointment of the CDS as a result of that group of ministers report. And she's been involved in putting together a first national defense review. Of course, she works and now does her own writing and analysis, also works with the IPCS. So over to you, Dr. Kartha.
Yeah, okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rebut the fact that I'm a supposed pro-Pakistan person. Because that's what I was told. Okay, what I'm trying to say now, this is in all seriousness. See, we are actually at an inflection point. You know, you're confronting a very severe international crisis. I mean, this is basically the Third World War. From Ukraine. You may not recognize it as such because it has a different dimension. It is not readily seen as a world war. So therefore you don't see, you can't make out what its contours are, which makes it that much more dangerous. It's not a world war, obviously, in terms of, the lines, but Europe has done this to us again. Second, of course, is the fact that it's a post-COVID era. And also the fact that climate change, once upon a time, it was a fashionable subject. All the ones in, the IIC crowd used to talk about climate change in their khaki saris and things like that. I mean, khadi, sorry, not khaki. Sorry, that was a mistake. And that was it. But now it's real. And it's only just started. Believe me, we've just seen the beginnings of it. So you're going to have to look at things differently. You just saw, I may be corrected if I'm wrong, I think we offered wheat to the world. We said we will feed the world. And then we had the hottest summer ever, and the entire crop, not entire, but a good part of it was destroyed. So where climate change is directly affecting your policy, so things are different. I'm entirely at one with those who say that 7% growth is what you should look for. Once you get that, then your security grows from there. How do you get there? You want to make sure that the conflict is, as much as possible, you can, literally make sure that doesn't happen, which is where my talk of Pakistan and China comes from. That is where the base is. If you can avoid war and conflict, then you're somewhere towards getting what you want amid these myriad challenges. So that is basically where I'm coming from. Now try and put yourself in the shoes of the new Pakistan Army Chief. He's seeing a scenario which no Army Chief has ever seen before. There are people calling the Army Chief a kutta. I mean, that is what he's saying in public. The army has been reviled, and now the latest information which has come on the tax, this thing of course, these are declared assets. So you and I can't call it corruption, they're declared assets. But when the Pakistan Army Chief's wife has got $500,000 in US banks, that is really something. I mean, so the people of Pakistan have backed Imran Khan because they believe in his honesty. I mean, they may think he's crazy in other senses. But the fact is, all they got against Imran Khan was the Tosha Khana, which I think most of you know. There's really no great scandal which they've been able to attack him on. So Pakistan's, this new chief is supposed to be a protege of General Bajwa. He was thrown out literally the shortest ISI tenure. So I don't think he'll like Imran Khan very much. But he has to deal with these circumstances which we also face, but multiplied by 10 or 100. So that is the regional situation you're dealing with. So anything that you propose now at this point is likely to go ahead. That is all I'm saying. I'm not saying we can never think of friendship with Pakistan. It's not going to happen. Because their mindset is such that, for them, they need an enemy and there's nobody else. They start talking of Afghanistan as an enemy now. And if you see in the last few, the crisis which has taken place in Pakistan, there's no mention of India at all. It's all about, the trouble inside. There are issues with Afghanistan, there are issues with the US, nothing on India. So in this, I'm just saying, because my job is always to look forward. Look forward 10 years. You have an opportunity, you want to take it, it's up to you. Now coming to, I'm just picking on some things. Unfortunately, I've left my specs there. But all the same, as I said, we are at an inflection point. So when we are talking of, I'm picking on the things which other people, no, don't worry, I'm okay. No, that's okay. That's okay. So when we talk of reform, what has been the history of reform? In some things which I'm going to flag from the Kargil Review Committee onwards. So it is in any reform, we had the group of ministers report, which we had the action taken reports thereafter, which went on. Every ministry will take what is useful to it, which it gets more posts, which it increases in influence, and the rest of it is left behind. This is something which, but still, it was a commendable effort. And I think right now you need something like that. You need to sit down together, the ministers, especially with this government, where I've seen there are some very fine ministers on board. These are people who know what they want because they've been given a direction. And that is what the Prime Minister is supposed to do, and he's done it. So I think that is one recommendation which I would consider, that you sit down and decide which is the way you want to go. Because lots of people say, you don't have a national security doctrine, how do you know where? I don't think you really need one. Because this is good enough. If you can do this, because what you want is within government. You don't always want to tell the world what your security priorities are. Leave that to the powerful guys. You don't want transparency when you're weak. So that's, of course, that's a separate discussion. Now, arising from that is the problem is in sustaining reform is middle-level bureaucracy. I mean, each of these people are extremely intelligent, extremely bright. But that, everyone works in 4-year, 2-year, 3-year terms. No one wants to push a file which is likely to, spoil his career. That is a problem. So again, can you bypass that? You can bypass that if the minister is empowered to push that, so that the responsibility then lies with the minister. You have that, it is a real problem because you can't really blame anyone. I mean, there's no question of giving someone, but then these are the things which impede the kind of reforms that we need to put forward, some of which are very unpopular within what shall we say, within small communities, if you like. And again, arising from the above is that when we talk of reform, certain posts, I think, should be made specifically for where you must have training for at least 3 to 4 months before you take over, because it requires specialized knowledge in those particular posts. And we've to go on the lighter side, I remember giving a presentation on AVAX to somebody, and we did the whole thing, and in the end, he says, ये AVAX क्या satellite से होता है कि नहीं, something on that. AVAX का full form क्या है or something. So you can't deride such a person because someone has, say, come from the railways and then he's put into defense production and then he's given a file. He said, okay, now you decide. You see, so these I believe our bureaucrats are among the most brightest in India. They're bright, they're extremely hardworking, but some posts I think need specific training before they are able to take it on. And another thing from the Kargil Review Committee was this question of jointness, which I'm not talking of jointness of the Army, Navy, Air Force, I'm talking of jointness in decision making. Any act which requires interministerial coordination is where you want to do a bit of headbanging. Because it is almost, it's an extremely difficult task because each person has already come with this brief, on what he should do, what is the position of the minister involved. So that is, I'll give you, for example, I can tell you, we talk of COP 27, right? There's all the big words, there's all the big acronyms involved. You will still find that the electricity department will chop the trees left, right, and center, and the forest department will happily give permission. Though you are running in a time where the government has said not a single tree should be cut because of pollution, recently in Delhi. But the trouble is, if your electricity goes, you'll blame the electricity department and say, bijli nahi hai. He has to do it. Coordination to get what you want right at the bottom. So delivery, the last mile delivery is where we have a problem. That's the last one. Each department does it best. I'm going to stop here. I'm just flagging these like bullet points in terms of what you're going to face when we talk of reform. And the time lag, of course, in decision making, especially in the Ministry of Defense. I don't know how many of you all have seen Rodham Narasimhan. He has a note which has been put out, which is brilliant. And it tells you so clearly why we have been so, and HF24, that could have been a success story of your country. And it just withered away. I mean, this man who was brilliant, and it never worked. So that is in terms of reforms. In terms of policy, well, you just had a fantastic thing on the New World Order. Like we said, there is no world order. It's all disorder. It's what you can make of it. Now, non-alignment gave you a kind of a platform which, you could punch above your weight. You had nothing at the time when you started non-alignment. Now you need to think of a different platform. What is that going to be? Can you think of, for example, we are now a major aid giver. From giving practically nothing, now we are giving aid at a fairly high level. Can you think of a platform, just for an example, that the countries that you give aid to can be made part of a grouping? Because what I find is we have these disparate groupings, which all seem to do different things. So, is it possible then to, I think we need a platform which will then allow us to put in the dimensions that you want, rather than just going by the, what was called, rules-based order, which is, of course, we know whose rules that is. But so that is just, I'm going to stop there. Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think you've given some food for thought there. And in fact, we'll discuss all this in some of the questions that we do. Our final speaker here and for the opening remarks is General S.L. Narasimhan, China specialist, also member of the NSAB, and someone who's now heading MEA think tank, which watches China in all its dimension, the CCCS, Contemporary Center for China Studies, and of course has served as our defense attaché in Beijing, and a very prolific writer and speaker at various places. You heard in the morning he's been to various places in the last 4 or 5 days. So over to you, General Narasimhan.
Thank you, Mr. Nitin. At the outset, let me thank the Pune International Center for giving me an opportunity, particularly General Patankar, who traced me down wherever I was. Thank you very much, sir. Before I start my remarks, I'm going to make a few points about the morning discussion that we have had. On the influence operations in India, which Ambassador Gautam flagged in the morning, Australia has made a report. IRSCM in France has made a huge report of 500-600 pages on that. Notwithstanding that, our center has made 4 different papers on China's influence operations in India. But that's in the confidential domain. I'll just leave the message with you. We are looking at that aspect is what I wanted to convey. Second is on the safety of nuclear weapons in Pakistan. There was a question in the morning. Some time ago, there was an audit which was done on this. And we found that not much of a loophole was found in the security aspects of the nuclear arsenal in Pakistan. The third one is on the nuclear red lines. We had a discussion in the morning. I want to leave this thought with you on this. You have already given a red line saying that any weapon used on you, you will retaliate massively. But if you are going to lay further red lines on this, you will be diluting that position, is my view. I leave it open for the thinking of the audience here. China's investment in Afghanistan, there was a question. Our assessment was that China will not go into Afghanistan and invest heavily till the time they find some stability out there, and also ensure that the Uyghurs are not operating from that soil. Both are still pending, but recently we noticed some of the recce parties from many of the companies in China have gone in there to scout around what they need to invest there. Lessons for India from Ukraine war. I think first lesson we get is we need to face our threats on our own. You will get some assistance, fine, but ultimately the groundwork and the boots on the ground have to be yours. There's no other way out. 2, the ground forces and the air forces integration. That was very, very seriously lacking in this Russian campaign. So that is another lesson that we will be able to take from here. Third, the power of the information warfare and the need for strategic communication. Look at the way Ukraine has won this particular aspect of war. Mr. Zelensky has gone almost to every parliament and spoken. Most of the view was turned in favor of Ukraine by that particular thing, and also the effective use of social media and the strategic communication that he did. And the last point I think we'll take from here is the will to resist. The way the Ukrainian people have stood up stood up to the Russian offensive and made sure that the Russian offensive did not achieve the result that they expected initially to achieve within a short period of time is the other lesson that we can take. There is also a question on the end game for COVID. They've already started relaxing, as a remark was made in the morning. We pick up in the Chinese media articles that there have been certain meetings to think about it and then implement it progressively. So starting from March is what they are saying. Starting from March, maybe they will be progressively relaxing the restrictions on COVID. Breaking of China-Pakistan nexus, there was a discussion in the morning. My own reading is breaking is not going to be successful or achieve any results. You need to work despite this. So we need to work on alternatives, thinking that China will help Pakistan and what we need to do about it. That is the way we need to go around this question. These are the initial remarks I had on the last discussion we had. I have 3 points to make on my remarks. First is the point which Ambassador Mishri made in the morning. I fully support that view that it is expanding. And the problem is it is expanding constantly. If it is expanding and stopping somewhere, then you can think about it and then resolve it. But every other day, you will find a new security threat coming up to you. Like, for example, we talked about a lot of security issues in the morning. Maritime security is gaining maximum importance today. You find the kind of gray zone operations being done from the maritime domain. You look at the underwater fishing, underwater domain awareness campaign that are going on. You find the illegal and unreported fishing that is going on. So this maritime security is going to be a major problem for you in your own EEZ and beyond. The new one which has come up is space security. Space security, nobody has talked about it so far. The reason why I am saying is the recent activities which are monitored of the Chinese. Look at the way a robotic arm of a Chinese satellite pushed their own dead satellite into dead space in the space. If he can do that to his satellite, he can do it to any other satellite. Recently, they employed artificial intelligence, which the satellite used to go around 20,000 orbits and then hunted a satellite, their own satellite, of course. So if these are the kind of things that you are going to face in future, I think we need to get ready now. The other thing we talked about is post-COVID. You find the biosecurity gaining importance. If the biosecurity has been constant and been done well, we wouldn't find COVID in the world today. So biosecurity is another field that we need to be looking at. Lastly, there was also a discussion on food security in the morning. I think the lady there asked a question on the food security. Today, irrespective of what you want to grow and what you would like to grow in the country, you are still dependent on external sources for your sustenance. Like, for example, look at the amount of pulses we import from Myanmar. Look at the number of other things that we import from others for our own sustenance. So it is interlinked. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. The last point is on narcotics. Post-Taliban's takeover in Afghanistan, you find an increase in the narcotics in this region. So this is another thing that you need to constantly be looking at. So having said this, the problem that you're going to face, that is my second point, all these have got linkages within various ministries in the government. You take space security, you'll have space involved, Ministry of Defense involved, others involved. Similarly, you take any of these aspects, number of ministries are going to be involved. And the point which Tara pointed out, each ministry is going to be looking at it differently. So that brings me to the third point, and that will be my last point. We need to have an organization to look at these emerging threats to us, keep monitoring it and keep coordinating the responses. And probably this is a point for Ambassador Mishri. We need to have some kind of a setup probably in the National Security Council Secretariat with representatives from all stakeholders positioned there so that they can identify this and take it forward together to bridge those silos that we find. I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you, General Narasimhan. I think that was brief and with a lot of brevity, you brought out important points. So I think having set this stage, let me now start the discussion by asking one common question to all three of you. And the common question is that if there is a world disorder that we are looking at, and if there is an uncertainty staring us in the face across the globe, what is it that India must do? And is India then likely to be a new pole, as some people have started suggesting? So let me ask Mr. Umranikar to begin and then go around.
As I mentioned in my presentation, probably we have to be suitably aligned. Rather than going for the old non-alignment, we have to evolve ourselves in various alliances, not in the sense of being militarily allied, but find common interests and have various groupings in which we can push our self-interest further. And I'm a firm believer in the fact that security has to be given priority when it comes to nation building. And I would say that we should never forget that aspect. Security has to be given utmost importance. I'm not saying that you have to deny other fields of the resources, but this should be the first priority. That's the only way we can sustain ourselves in this world.
I think that's a great point. If I can have your views, Dr. Tara.
No, I think I said that I think we need to make another platform of our own. Because
So I want you to elaborate on
The
that.
thing
So if you say that we are helping, say, countries in the neighborhood, the African nations, elsewhere, we are giving money. So do you think that, like BIMSTEC has been attempted, so it was described as SARC minus Pakistan in some forums. Is that the way forward? I mean, are you going to look at only people who are aligned with you, or
No,
how are you going to
it's
do?
not that. You still have to be engaged with, say, the US and your Quad, for example, which has become quite important for your how to deal with China. And I think the ministry has done a fantastic job of sort of keeping a very fine line in how much it backs Quad. But nonetheless, you can't do this alone. I mean, things are so it could be on aid, it could be on dependencies. Say you have certain dependencies where you on grain or whatever it is. But that the ministry, I think, is capable of deciding what it wants, but thereafter back it. I mean, you had a forum which is the one with Vietnam and
The ASEAN plus,
no,
the ADDM plus? Or?
no, there's just yet another one. There's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, there are several of them. The BCI.
There's a whole lot
there
of
is-
them. So
yeah,
I'm saying
okay.
try and integrate all this into one which you can then use, because at this point of time you really need help.
Okay.
You need the words and you need the
But,
help.
but does only India need the help, or other countries also now need to look at
Everybody
realignment?
Everybody.
That's the point. The world
that's the
disorder that
thing.
we are talking about.
No,
is-
you may find a person is an enemy on one front and a friend on the other. So that is how it is going to be. Like I think in an article I wrote recently, I said shapeshifters. That is how your international, it's going to be that China may be a friend at some forums. At other forums, it certainly isn't.
Okay, great point. General Narasimhan?
I think in a world which is going to be dominated by disorder, the way we need to look at is to work in smaller groupings, like we see now, and wherein you find issue-based countries which have got a common interest to work together, come together and deliver it. So I think that is the way we need to look at it. The larger congregations of groupings of countries is unlikely to work in the present scenario.
So in that context, now let me start the second question. The relevance or irrelevance of UNSC, the UN Security Council, is now very evident for the past several years. So in that respect, how does India look at forming new groupings? There was some suggestion from, I think, Ashley Tellis said it should be India, France, and US. Somebody said Australia, India, and France in the Indian Ocean can do this. Is that the way forward? Are we looking at these kind of groupings?
See, I still feel that the UN, if the reforms are done, UN still will have a role to play. So as far as we are concerned, we should try and get that seat in UN Security Council and then be there on the decision-making table. That is one way of looking at it. The other thing is on the other issues. Like, for example, there are many issues. Like, for example, you take, for example, the production of vaccines, for that matter. If you can form a group of countries, like Quad has got this initiative, wherein Japan is going to fund and we are going to produce and we are going to supply to the world.
Right. Yeah.
It is a story which can be a very successful story. So on issue-based things like this, you come together, somebody gives the funding, somebody has the manufacturing capability, you join hands together and deliver the goods to the mankind. I think that is the way to go probably in future.
I think that's a fair point, and I think that's one. I think the decision makers, I'm sure, are looking at it completely. Switching gears or switching the subject, since you watched Pakistan, you've sort of been in Pakistan. Yeah, just keep it. One of the things that, because in the context of the new Pakistan Army chief being appointed and, several profiles of him saying he could be a more hardliner than the earlier people, or whatever. But in the current state that Pakistan is in, how much of a threat it should be seen as to India? Does India have to really look over his shoulder all the time on the Western front, or what's the sense you have?
No, first thing is we should not look at Pakistan Army Chief as an individual.
Right.
And there is a collegium working, and it's the collegium that normally decides the policies that the Army Chief is going to announce. So he is like a fountainhead.
Okay.
But there is a collegium that works. So you can't really define that, say, Munir is going to be more hard than what Bajwa was and things like that. It will depend on that collegium, whatever they're thinking. Right now, Pakistan is going through a very difficult phase. Internally, there's a lot of unrest. Even the army is divided between Imran and against Imran camps. I mean, that's the indication. Economically, they are in dire straits. The Chinese are helping them, but not as much as the Pakistanis would like to. Afghanistan is a black hole, and the expected dividends from Afghanistan have not come. In fact, Afghanistan is turning more and more hostile towards Pakistan. And when you take all this together, then today probably Pakistanis would like to bat with straight bat. So we may not have escalated tensions, but the moment the things start easing, the moment the elections, if they get announced and they start approaching, you will find that there will be again a tirade against India and some activities in Kashmir and things like that. That's my expectation.
I see.
Yeah.
So, having said that, and this is a question to both of you. So, is this the right time? So, I'm going to sort of provoke you in an answer here. But first, you can answer this. That is it the right time to initiate a thaw with Pakistan?
Well, I am a hardliner on Pakistan.
Well, that's a good disclaimer.
I've spent 4.5 years there. Another 6 months probably I would have got citizenship by naturalization. So I know my Pakistani, and one-to-one they are extremely hospitable and good people. But when they turn into a group, when they turn into a community, when they turn into a nation, there's a lot of India baiting and a lot of animus against us. I don't see Pakistani psyche improving at least for another 1 or 2 generations.
Oh, that's a very definitive statement to make. But Tara, your views on this, because I heard you online. So correct me if I am wrong. That you said this is probably the opportunity to initiate some thaw with Pakistan.
No, I wouldn't say.
That time when you were sitting there and talking.
Okay, this is what.
Didn't she say that?
He was supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly.
He was supposed to be talking at the NDA. He was listening to us.
I was coming back. On my way back, I heard you.
No, I thought it was that at that point of time. See, you have to think of these things.
Okay.
If you go on the same pattern, then there's nothing new here that we are discussing. We might as well all sit at home and do this online. What I'm trying to say is that, see, I met a bunch of young Pakistanis.
Okay.
They are more hardline than the older generation. I mean,
Right.
it was very sad to say that. Because why? Because they have no exposure to us at all. Now, when I was piddling to 22, 25, we were meeting with Pakistanis all the time. So it didn't mean that we were thick friends with them. No, we were still as suspicious of them as ever.
Okay.
But they knew you to an extent, and we knew them. So Which is why when you said, like recently the missile was fired, Pakistan and India have always had a degree of maturity, which you don't see in the West. We have managed things so well, but let's build on that. Let's have a common, some kind of a talk. Don't forget that the US and the Soviet Union continuously talk to each other. When you're nuclear powers, you have to talk. That doesn't mean a thaw, but keep talking.
That's a fair point.
About the maturity, I would like to cite a few anecdotes. When I got posted to Pakistan, within a few months, General Zia's plane crashed. So what do you think, what was the rumor? I don't have to spell out. Then there was Ojri camp disaster, when literally parts of missiles kept on falling, some of them even in the backyard of our own houses in Islamabad. What was the rumor? It was always India. So about maturity of Pakistan, I am not very clear. What happened about this missile is probably before the word spread, and the people had said that this was something innocent, something innocuous, and that's why it did not catch fire as it normally does in Pakistan.
It does escalate. But talking about anecdotes, I must share this with this audience. This goes back exactly a decade. We were doing a track 2 in Dubai, my only track 2 with the Pakistanis, and probably one coming up next month in Bangkok on the nuclear risk reduction thing. I'm going there next month. But that one was done by New America. Peter Bergen and Steve Cole were organizing it, and there was Nazam Sethi on the Pakistani side. There were a couple of recently retired brigadiers from the Pakistan Army. And from our side, I was there and 2 IDSA researchers. And we were talking about whether the two militaries can do CBMs. Is it possible? So I was going to talk. So Nazam said, I'm the senior most, I'm going to speak at the end. He wanted to have the last word. I said, fine. Steve said, you go last. I was the second last speaker. And in the course of my presentation, I was saying that the Indian military, Indian security establishment has started looking at China as a major challenge, reorienting itself towards the northern borders post 2008-9. And by 2012, it was very clear where the emphasis was in expanding the military infrastructure, all that. As I was saying this recently retired Pakistani brigadier got up in the middle of my presentation and said, wait. China is not your enemy number 1. We are your enemy number 1. So Steve had to tell him that please let him finish. So there you are, the psyche of Pakistanis.
No, but I must tell this anecdote. This is about Ambassador S.K. Singh, who was my ambassador when I was posted there. Then he became High Commissioner also because they joined the Commonwealth. So there was a standard practice on 26th of January. Indian ambassador will deliver a speech at NDC Rawalpindi. And Ambassador S.K. Singh had a practice. He will go there and say, I am Ambassador S.K. Singh of India. Now I am open to questions. Because whatever he says, there will be questions. So he will first ask for the questions only.
Yeah, that's what.
And during the tea time, again a brigadier came up to me and said, please tell me, how do you expect Pakistanis to forget that you divided Pakistan in 71? So I had to tell him, just the way you expect us to forget that you divided India in 47. So that sort of sealed the moment. But what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of deep-rooted animals right. in people there.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, no, it doesn't matter. I want to move away from Pakistan and go to our bigger strategic challenge, China. And here's a China specialist here. So when we look ahead, 5 years ahead, 6 years ahead, and this world disorder that we are talking about, what do you expect China to do in terms of, it's already sort of closing its gap with the United States. It's leaving everyone else behind. Do you expect Xi Jinping now to become more aggressive vis-a-vis everything, not just India? I was in Taiwan, like General Partner mentioned, for 8 days, and there the thing is mixed. That whether China is going to invade or not invade, the opinion is divided in Taiwan. But Taiwan is a low-hanging fruit in some people's minds. What do you expect Xi Jinping to do in the world, across the globe?
Across the globe, I would say that there will be two or three things that we need to look at. One is the number of initiatives that China is trying to push through. Okay, one is this global initiative on data security. The second one is the Global Development Initiative. The third one is the Global Security Initiative. Now, the explanations of this Global Security Initiative clearly indicate that the One Belt, One Road initiative is embedded into Global Development Initiative, and the Global Development Initiative is embedded into the Global Security Initiative. And one of the major tenets of that initiative is looking for or creating an alternative security architecture in the world, and that is going to affect all the countries around. Post April 22, when Xi Jinping announced this in POA Forum, in every meeting that they have with other countries, they have been trying to push these agendas. So this is something that they will do. On the foreign policy front, there are two prongs of strategy that I see. Whenever their core interests are affected, like say, for example, Taiwan or Xinjiang, Tibet, Taiwan, Hong Kong, South China Sea, they are going to react very violently. They are going to put literally butters this whole thing. On the other hand, they're also having a plan of making China a soft power superpower by 2035. Xi Jinping has made this statement. He has briefed his diplomats to go and sell the China story well and make China lovable.
Move away from wolf warrior diplomacy.
Move away from wolf warrior diplomacy, but it's still happening. That's a different issue. The fact of the matter, they are going to have a two-pronged kind of strategy that is going to come up. On the bilateral thing, I find the same issue, like some face-offs are likely to happen because the line of actual control is not demarcated and not mutually understood by both the sides, and so this is likely to continue. So this is the way I see the trend going for the next few years. Overall, China would like to increase its influence through these and also through standard setting. In many of the UN organizations, they hold the leading positions, and so they involve themselves in standard setting for the world. The next one, which is going to be on the line, is 6G, and we need to be careful about that.
That's right. So, one briefly, before I ask the next question. So, what should India's response be? I'm not talking about security, because we mentioned that the skirmishes or face-offs will keep happening. What about the other sectors? Like 6G you've just mentioned. What about, how do you decouple China from trade? How do you sort of get away? And how do you influence the neighborhood? I mean, reduce their influence, rather.
On the neighborhood, I would say they haven't had a full success. Sure. You look at any of these countries, they got just a mixed bag kind of a thing. And I think our efforts in the neighborhood has been really working well. Foreign Secretary has been recently in Myanmar. I think our effort in the neighborhood is actually working out really well. And the way we helped out Sri Lanka and all that is working really to our advantage. On the other side, the first part of your question,
I was saying that how should India respond in other sectors?
Right. Firstly, we need to get involved in the standard setting part of it. That is extremely important for us, because then what will happen is our standards will get propagated. And in this, we need to get into collaboration with some of the countries which are technologically advanced. That is being looked into at this point in time. The other way of looking at it is the way we have been. I find China's efforts are going to be directed towards groups of countries. One is the Pacific Island countries, ASEAN, South Asia, Central Asian republics, West Asia, Europe. So this is the kind of group of countries that they are going to be dealing with, and that is where we are also going to be dealing with. This is where I find some kind of competition kind of a thing which could develop. And I see that more developing in West Asia firstly, and then in the other countries. So we need to be careful about that and take the remedial measures which are already being looked into. I think the way we are seeing in the next few years, this is the kind of competition kind of a thing that will go on, keep going on.
Sure, with China especially. Tara, to you, you spoke about need of reforms. I mean, that was your central point, that we need, while the architecture is there, the system is there, but it needs reforms in every segment. How do you propose to do that? And what's your, say, two major points to the government if you were asked that this needs to be done, or suggest? Because you've worked inside for a long time. And now when you are out, what do you think needs to be done?
No, just rising from China's success with our neighbors. One statistic, I don't know if it's correct, that 60% of the arms exports are to India's neighbors. So there you go. If China is
that a correct figure? I am not sure. That's Pakistan, basically, I think. It's mostly Pakistan and Bangladesh.
Also, I think Myanmar and Bangladesh.
Each country.
Pakistan and Bangladesh.
But they are supplying arms to Bangladesh.
There's no denial of the fact.
So, okay, whatever percentage it may be, I would assume that your once you get even, say, one or couple of orders from your neighbors, then you start a relationship, because then there's the spares, then there's the servicing, there's the whole thing. That is where we've deficient, but which this government knows, and which is precisely what it's trying to address. Why? In terms of what we should do in reform is it's not so much specific. As I said, it is systemic.
It's coordination you were talking about.
Sorry?
If I understood, you were talking about better coordination at the middle level and the local,
you
lower
have
level.
interministerial coordination, which is, like I said, is difficult because of the reasons we already discussed. Right. And I think you need something like a GOM, because we are confronting a security, primarily economic situation, which is we've never confronted in quite a while. I mean, I don't know if it's unprecedented or not.
Right.
But we really need government to work together. What we talk of whole of government approach, it's not there. It can't be done. It's not anybody's fault. That's how the system has grown over the years. No, anything which can speed up decision making. And I should tell you, without being thought a complete sycophant, that during that short period when I was with the present government, I saw decisions being taken faster than I've seen ever.
Sure. No, but so isn't
that is there, but that's not enough. It has to be implemented.
Taking that point further, isn't the National Security Council Secretariat supposed to be one point kind of coordinating agency, 1 point advisory agency? And I think I saw a press report where the Prime Minister seems to have pulled up secretaries, and I think Vikram was making that presentation. That's what the news item said. And the reaction to that, the Prime Minister said that NSC's advice should not be ignored, or is being ignored. Something of that kind the report said.
That often happened. It was, to be perfectly frank,
right,
where an NSCS paper which was just quietly put aside. And I remember certain defense ministers saying, we have taken note of it. And that was the end of it.
Okay.
So that happens. But that is the NSCS is the coordination place.
Yeah,
that is where it should.
So shouldn't that be strengthened and made more efficient rather than having another?
Yeah, but then remember, the GOM worked because the ministers were on board. You know, here you've got an NSA who's probably works 24/7. But once you get the ministers on board, like someone, I'm not going to take names, okay?
Sure.
But these guys, if you get them on board, things will get done.
Point taken.
And number two is implementation on the ground. That is where they're failing.
That's right.
And that again is a bureaucracy problem.
Why did I ask you is because if you have to have an efficient security architecture, a comprehensive security architecture, then you must have all the parts of that machine moving simultaneously.
Yeah, that doesn't always happen. And that can lead to some very dangerous results.
Sure.
And dangerous assumptions, that we can do X, Y, Z when you can't.
Right. Get the point. Switching tracks again and coming to you, if you can. We're just coming back. Now I'm going to open it, but last question from me, and then we'll open it to others. In the morning, there was a discussion, I think Mr. Pillai also mentioned about the polarization that is happening, and the threat to internal security in terms of different conflicts, caste conflict, communal conflict, all that, and the threat to the rule of law. Is that something that we should worry about as far as the security architecture? And if the internal situation is not stable, it's not under control, is that going to be a major problem for India when it wants to play a major role in the global affairs?
It could be a major problem. In fact, when you were talking about reforms, I thought that someone will mention police reforms. They are pending from 1903, when Fraser Commission was first established. And Fraser observed that police reforms have to be conducted. He suggested that it will take something like 2-3 crores of rupees in those days for police reforms. British Parliament accepted his suggestion and sanctioned 50 lakhs. So this is what has been happening to police reforms in India throughout for the last 2 centuries now. We are starved of funds when we need them. There are funds which go astray. And the basic autonomy that the police desire has never been given to them. Everyone keeps on saying that you don't deserve it. That's a very Churchillian kind of approach to responsibility, saying that these guys don't deserve independence. But we did deserve, and we maintained our independence. So maybe the police will also do that. Why don't you try giving autonomy? So this is one grouse I have against, 40 years I was in police, so all that period we have been thinking about police reform, they have not happened. What we don't realize is that the kind of stratification that is taking place in the society, and it's deliberate, it's very deliberate. The identity politics is at its peak. And in fact, I would say, I mentioned Huntington. He has mentioned two civilizations in India. One is a Hindu civilization, other is Islam. And in fact, he cites Kashmir problem as a civilizational problems. So let's not take the things very lightly. This is likely to exacerbate, and unless we have very, very strong, I would say, law and order setup, things might become very unmanageable if we are going to face a civilizational problem at some stage.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to add something? And then I'll open up to the others.
Sorry, this is just again on the reforms
Sure.
aspect.
Sure.
See, all of us wait for government to do something. Question is, what are you doing?
Well, I am writing.
But, for example, here are the bottles, these little bottles on the
Plastic bottles.
And where is the ban on single plastic? So when, again I'm quoting the Prime Minister when he says, you also have a duty as a citizen.
Of course.
And that doesn't mean just, it also means somebody raised that issue of land grabbing. These are all issues which as a society, like if I tweet on Pakistan, it will be retweeted some 500 times. If I tweet on climate change, not even one. So, there's no public consciousness of what we should do. When the army goes and fights somewhere, they'll all stand up and say, yes, Zindabad. Next, after 6 months, if I say I want to increase the pay and allowance of the army, there'll be 100 people to say no. So
that of course the consciousness.
You cannot have, unless you get the government you deserve. Simple.
True. So let me open up. Yes, I'll just coming to you. So what I'm going to do is to take a bunch of 3 questions at a time and then go to the next round. So Mr. Soni, you raise the hand first. So over to you, sir. There.
Thank you, Nitin. First, may I mention a word of appreciation and praise for all the contributions made so far, and especially beginning with the National Security Advisor, Ambassador Misri, and the 2 panels, and this panel particularly. And today it is very apposite that we hold this PDNS. Today happens to be the 14th anniversary of an important event that took place in Mumbai on 26/11/2008. And it also happens to be the anniversary of the completion of the constitution-making process in 1949. So this is a very interesting juxtaposition of threat to India and what India stands for. It also brings to mind the supreme sacrifice made by Veer Tukaram Omble, the significance of which we all know. So it gives us an occasion to pay homage to that hero. I wanted to mention 3 points in addition to this preface. First, very rightly, it has been brought out in the discussion so far and the presentations that the term national security requires to be fully comprehended in all its dimensions, and not beyond the political and military, and extending also to the economic, the environment aspects, etc., the cultural dimension also. I should like to add here that national security also involves intimately the safeguarding of national values, the whole idea of what India stands for. And we have here an occasion to underline one concept which is articulated in the time of another great, one of the greatest monarchs of all time. I refer, of course, to our Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, when he spoke of Hindavi Swaraj, and Hindavi Padapatshahi, and Maharashtra Dharma, the concept of a great nation, an inclusive nation, a pluralistic nation, but a nation also which was vigilant about its security and which was prepared and to defend and attack as required on land and sea. So that concept of Maharashtra Dharma needs to be propagated and needs to be propagated from the highest level. So one message that we need to focus on is how to promote that, and perhaps the Prime Minister of India and the head of state of our republic can take the lead in doing this, in promoting the concept of Hindavi Swaraj and Maharashtra Dharma, not of the state alone, but for a great state, the great state of Brihan Maharashtra. You know, there was the ancient concept of Asetu Himachalam, that is from the sea up to the mountains, the western and the eastern Himalayas, not the Hindu Kush, which in Farsi means the killer of Hindus, that term should never be mentioned. It should be Western Himalayas, Asetu Himachalam. That is point number one. Second point I want to mention is that in the context of safeguarding national security in a changing world order, it is extremely important that there should be bipartisan consensus across the entire political spectrum on matters of national security. And that is not going to happen accidentally. We are not a small insular state like England was of the 17th century, or Germany was, or Japan is. We are a subcontinent. Even now, even after our trifurcation, that trifurcation has resulted because of policies of Whitehall. So we need to develop a bipartisan consensus in relation to national security, and the initiative needs again to be taken at the highest political level. And this is also a message that should go out from us. Third point is that the intelligentsia have a very, very important, if I may say, core role to play in this. And PDNS and its sister organizations, therefore, should be in the forefront of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can I have other questions? Yes, please. 1 minute there, and 2 here, and 3. So that way. 1, 2, and 3.
Diverse India is so accommodative to several people, several religions, and everything is so much accommodative in India. Why we are still so vulnerable to several things?
Which to vulnerable to?
Several
Subversion.
threats, what we discussed.
Okay, subversion. Yeah, the next question. I'll ask the answers a little later. Here. No, the mic should be here.
I'm Praful Talera. I just want to ask, in this post-hegemonic world, as it was, that was the theme for the Worldwide Discussion Club in Moscow, where Putin addressed. Are we seeing the emergence of a multipolar world? This is for the whole panel.
Sure. Third question here. There was a hand here. Yeah, and then we'll take the answers together.
My name is Lieutenant Colonel M.K. Gupta Ray, retired. I have 2-3 points. First is that though we have been talking about the Pakistan and China and vis-a-vis India, but despite their brinkmanship, no country today go for war unless they're threatened. Pakistan will probably attack when they're threatened, and so China, either economically or physically. Now, in that brinkmanship apart, when we are thinking about we are talking about defenses all the time, have we ever thought of our offensive capability? Because no war is won by defenses. Napoleon said, those who fight from the bunker, they always lose. And participating in 1971 war, we captured 45 kilometers of Pakistan area in Kashmir by being offensive. So we, at some point of time, can we think about offensive? One. Second is, have we ever thought of the Himalayas? It's a big barrier for any land operation from times immemorial. if you see the troops to task, though China has got 23 lakhs of troops and we have got 12 lakhs of military I'm talking military-wise. China has got 29,000 kilometers to guard. We have got 13,000 kilometers to guard. They have got 12 countries around. We have got 6 countries around. Our 6 countries are quite not very, they're quite okay with India. And there are a lot of Japan is there, Russia is there, Mongolia is there, Kazakhstan is there. Their countries are not very, very sort of friendly at times. So their troop to task when they are coming to India is reduced very much. Only 2 points they are ahead of us is missiles and navy. Are you guarding about these 2 things? Are you thinking that we get parity with missiles and navy? And the last point is, I don't know how to say that, but that is always playing in my mind. That is coming from the Uganda, the Entebbe, when this thing happened with Israel. In the night, all the opposition parties came together and made a national policies. Same with France. When the France were attacked by the militants, all the parties came together and made a policy. Can our major parties come together and make a policy, strategic policy for another 15, 20 years, that whosoever comes onto the power, this defense, foreign, economy, and infrastructure should have same policy.
Point taken, sir. Anything else?
No, sir. I said this only, then only you can get 8%.
Yeah, no,
then only you get 8% what you're thinking about 21st year.
Sure.
Otherwise, you cannot have this 8% for longer period unless you have unitary policy.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, if any one of you can respond to these 3 questions, may I ask General Narasimhan?
Why are we vulnerable for subversion?
Yes.
Right. There are 2, 3 things involved. Like, for example, is it working? Is the mic working?
Yeah, I think so.
It's working. Yeah. One is you take your mind back in history a little bit. Look at our northeastern areas. Okay, they are part of India, right? But who went in there? It is mostly the Christian missionaries who went there. And then they were able to motivate the people to join Christianity. But there is, in the valley in Manipur, you find the valley is not affected. That is where Shankaracharya had gone. So it is a matter of who goes to whom and who appeals to those senses and who helps them in terms of requirement is something that helps them to get this kind of a wavering. So this is something we need to take cognizance of and deal with it. That is one. On the multipolar world, there was a question. What is that?
Yeah, he said in the post, this current conflict, after this, is there an emergence of a multipolar world?
I don't think the multipolar world is still there as yet. It will still remain a unipolar world for a couple of decades more to come. Till that time, some other countries catch up, and some other country is going to be China mainly. And that is going to be somewhere around 2049. That also corresponds to the second centenary goal of the Chinese to come up to that level. So I think around 2050, you will find the world will become unipolar to a bipolar, and then beyond, if something happens better for us, then it may become a multipolar world. On the third question which came up, unless one is threatened, offensive capabilities, yes, it is being catered for. You heard General Shokin Chauhan in the morning commanding the strike corps. Those are meant for the offensive operations anyway. On the Himalayas, let me tell you one thing, Himalayas are no more a barrier. We used to consider them as a barrier some time ago. Himalayas are no more a barrier. Technology and other equipment that we have has made that possible to operate across the Himalayan mountain ranges. So no more they are barriers, but yes, the terrain friction that any offensive operation from our adversaries will find on the Himalayan terrain after they cross the watershed is something that they'll have to face. The kind of problem that we face will become their problems. And so there are advantages that we have there. On the bipartisan policy, I think there are many people here who have worked in the government. I think they'll be able to better answer this than me.
Yeah. You want to respond on something?
about the subversion, I can tell you. Basically, in a democracy, subversion is easier. We don't have a police state, although we pretend to have a police state. See, there are just 3 policemen available per 2,000 people. So you can't really call that as a police state. And subversion is quite easy when there are strata of society who feel aggrieved. So much of it comes out of this animus against the system. But what I would like to tell you is that there is only one subversion in India that has lasted long, and that was the left-wing extremism. And that also because it had some kind of, I would say, tacit consent, probably that's the right word, from certain political parties. I won't name them. But otherwise, subversions have not lasted in India because ultimately the people catch on what is the truth. So it gets nipped probably not in the bud, but before it is full-blown.
Yeah, so on the subversion thing, I think one of the dangers, and I think Tara would say this more, but I would tend to think that the use of social media platforms and the interconnectivity that is there and the technology that is available, that is becoming one of the major tools of subversion. So that is what we have to be cognizant about. But unless you want to speak about, yeah, sure. You want to? Okay. After him, if you want to speak. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead if you want. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just very quickly, subversion, all the rest of it, all its distant cousins, everybody is available on the social media. And it's a very, very, very bad problem we are facing. Someone said something about internal threats being the primary thing. Internal threats have always been around. It's just that it's got terribly weaponized. So my only point is please be careful when you retweet. 90% of this stuff which you're retweeting is factually incorrect. There is amazing amount of disinformation going on.
One point I wanted to say about the subversion. Please look at the number of people who joined IS from India. That was the minimal. All other countries had more contribution. Even the very well-developed countries contributed more to IS than India. So subversion doesn't work everywhere. It works where an aggrieved party is there, like Mr. Jayant said, and when somebody goes to solve that grievance that these people have, then they tend to orientate themselves towards that. But a clear example of subversion not working is very minimal number of people joining IS from India.
True. So I have time only for at least last question, maybe one more question in case there is one, or maybe 2 of them now. So just quickly, 2 questions and I will end it here.
Okay. I have something to do with what Dr. Kartha said about the bureaucrats being brilliant bureaucrats. And I fully agree with that. One suggestion to make them more effective in the context of the reforms that we are planning is that bureaucrats must learn that they are managing people who know more than them. It's a big change, which is coming, no matter whether they can want it or not. And the second thing is, if you get someone who joins IAS, who's done his IIT graduation in technology, isn't there a possibility that we can directly put him as one of the people in this Department of Space, rather than making him do the 3, 4, 5 years in the districts, by which time he probably forgets his engineering anyway?
Yeah, well, I think the mic to be given there. The last question in this session.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Siddharth Bhagwat. I work as a research associate with PIC. My question is more from a youth perspective. So when I did my master's in Germany, we had a lot of Pakistani students there as well. It was my first time interacting with someone from that nation. But at the beginning of our interaction, no matter how awkward it was, by the end of the day, we were having beers and watching cricket games. So my question is, throughout these decades of conflicts and moments of very tense situations, we always keep wondering, when is there going to be a moment of peace with Pakistan? So I'm going to divide my question in 2 phases. One is, what does the ideal peace case scenario with Pakistan look like? And second part of this is, what is the goal of having this, or what is the goal we're trying to achieve at the end of this whole conflict with respect to Pakistan?
End of the conflict or end of this session?
Both.
I'm sorry, on the lighter vein.
Okay, all these difficult questions are mine. No, I think well, to be very frank, Pakistan as it is now is our ideal condition. I mean, it's completely concentrated inwards. It is fighting among itself. It is doing its own thing. Just go on doing that, and we are okay with it. But that's not. Change is always a case, right? It's going to change. Ideally, one would like. There is tremendous potential. I mean, there's somebody did a paper on this. If India and Pakistan were to trade, if we were to cooperate, for example, questions of what kind of agriculture policies each follows at a time when there's a crisis in cereals, crisis in wheat. You can take advantage of this, but then there's so much you can do. But that is the Valhalla, as we say.
Yeah, that's the Valhalla, yes.
I think we are probably influenced by what we hear about Akhand Bharat. So we keep on talking about India and Pakistan coming together. But it's not very easy to reach that stage. See what is happening today. Akhand Bharat people are, so to say, not opposing people who want Akhand Russia. But they have to oppose those who want Akhand China. So let's not dream of impossible situation at this moment. As I said, these things, it will take generations to heal the wounds of partition, and after that, forget what we have done to each other in the last 75 years.
I think that's a practical and a pragmatic way to sort of give you that answer. And on that note, I think all that remains for me to do is to thank my panelists here. A round of applause for them, and to the audience here for participating in the discussions. And thank you very much, PIC, General Patankar, and the organizers of the PDNS for giving me this opportunity to come and try and moderate this session. Thank you very much.